Hello everyone. So there's a lot going on in Syria over the past week with the empire, the Western Empire, US, Turkey, Israel doing absolutely everything they can to stop the Syrian advance on the largest Al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11, the large Al-Qaeda presence in Idlib. So I'm just going to be mostly going over an article I wrote yesterday, a post. The link will be in the description below, so check that out if you want to see any of the links. There's lots of links and sources and whatnot. So anyway, let's get right into it. On Thursday, Israel attacked Syria twice in the same day. So they're stepping up their unprovoked aggressions against Syria. Really nothing new there. But on Thursday morning, February 27th, an Israeli drone strike on the southern Syrian town of Hadar in Al-Qunitra province killed a Syrian civilian. You can see him in the picture here, Imad Tawil. The drone strike targeted Tawil as he was in his vehicle at the southern entrance of the town, according to local sources. And it might be that he was actually a Syrian army officer. It was first reported that he was a civilian, and then it was later reported that he was a Syrian officer. So either way, he was a Syrian. However, Israeli media claimed that Tawil was a Hezbollah affiliate involved in plans to attack the occupied Golan Heights. Israeli media sources reported that Tawil was linked to Hezbollah's infrastructure in the Syrian governorate of Al-Qunitra. The sources claimed that the individual was also involved in planning attacks on the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, South Front reported. There is, however, absolutely no evidence that the man had any links to Hezbollah. So that's that. Latest aggression by Israel. Nothing new there. Killing more Syrians in the name of expelling Iran from the country. Later on the same day, that evening, Thursday evening, Zionist forces carried out more attacks on Al-Qunitra, same province. Again, this time several Israeli helicopters launched missiles at several Syrian Arab army sites in the region, injuring at least 3 Syrian soldiers. Israel did not publicly claim the attacks. They rarely do. However, top Israeli officials have admitted to carrying out hundreds and, in fact, over 1,000 Syrian targets, mostly since 2017. It's a lot of attacks for a country that's supposedly not at war with Syria. The latest admission to Israel's covert war on Syria came in December, late in December, from IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, just before his retirement. So this is what he said. In January 2017, we began attacking the infrastructure the Iranians were building in Syria. The critical mass was from mid-2017, he said. We began attacking systematically a number of times each week without making any statements beneath the radar. And he also admitted that it's over 1,000 targets they had struck since throughout the war up until, through 2019. Obviously, they've been continuing strikes into 2020. But although Israeli officials continually claim that its attacks in Syria are targeting only Iran, the reality is that most of these strikes target Syrian military sites, often killing both Syrian soldiers and civilians, as happened in both these most recent attacks. The latest series of unprovoked attacks follow a larger Israeli air raid in Damascus earlier, the beginning of the week on Monday, in what turned out to be the second failed assassination attempt of a top Palestinian Islamic Jihad official in Damascus in less than a year. They also tried this last year, just a few months ago, and also failed. At that time, they killed multiple civilians. This time, they killed 2 Palestinians and as many as 4 additional fighters that the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights claimed were members of pro-Iranian militias. So that could be Hezbollah, could be other groups. It's hard to know what they mean by that. But they did identify one as a Syrian national. So that, if those claims are true, then that's 2 Syrians killed this week by Israeli airstrikes, 2 Palestinians also in Syria killed by Israeli airstrikes, and at least 3 more Syrian soldiers killed. And these latest attacks, there was no aggression by Syria. There were no threats by Syria to attack Israel. It's just a bunch of nonsense, and they're just continually attacking Syria because that's what they do, because they want to take Syria down, because Syria is one of the last countries that are actually willing to resist the Western imperialism and Israeli Zionism plans to expand and standing up for the Palestinians. This most recent Israeli aggression comes on the heels of a threat made by the newly appointed Israeli Defense Minister Naftali Bennett on February 19th that the Zionist entity would turn its so-called preemptive war on Iranian presence in Syria into an all-out offensive attack. This is what he said. "We will go from preventative action to offensive action, the only measure that guarantees us the expulsion of Iran out of Syria." Because apparently, proactively attacking the Syrian army for no reason is preventative action. God only knows what turning that into offensive action means. Maybe we're seeing the beginning of this week. Maybe this is exactly what's happening. He continues, "We are warning them. We will turn Syria into an Iranian Vietnam, and you will continue to bleed until the last Iranian soldier leaves Syrian territory," he threatened. Only problem is, there are no Iranian soldiers in Syrian territory, only advisors that are embedded within the ranks of the SAA. So it's ridiculous for him to threaten this, since how could any Iranian soldiers leave if they're not there to begin with? There's only advisors there, maybe commanders and advisors, but no soldiers on the ground actually fighting. Interesting. Nonetheless, even if there were soldiers, no matter what the Iranian presence is, it's 100% legal, because they're invited by the Damascus government, and they're helping Syria fight the NATO and Israeli-sponsored terrorist invasion of Syria. So it forms no justification whatsoever for the habitual violation of Syrian sovereignty in countless unprovoked aggressions against Syrian targets, or Iranian targets, or Hezbollah targets by Israel. It's illegal what Israel is doing, continually attacking Syria unprovoked. But that's what they do. Anyway, the advance in Idlib against the Western terrorist proxy armies continues. For the first time, the Turkish-backed terrorists have actually made some gains against Syrian army, unfortunately for Syria. They have lost a key town along the M5 highway. The highway's been cut off once again, but in trade-off, they got a huge amount of southern Idlib liberated. So tensions escalate very quickly this week because Turkey has become very involved in the war on Syria. They're not just backing the terrorists anymore, they're actively engaged in fighting the Syrian army. This is creating problems, escalating tensions, closer to a potential world war scenario with Russia there and Turkey fighting, Turkey trying to take out Russian fighter jets, among other things. So, on Thursday, Turkey eventually confirmed that 33 Turkish soldiers had indeed been killed in Syrian attacks in southern Idlib, another blow to President Erdogan's insane dreams to revive the Ottoman Empire by not only using Turkish soldiers as human shields to shield al-Qaeda fighters, but also to send them to the front lines to confront the advancing Syrian army alongside the terrorists. That's why they were hit. They were killed when the SAA targeted a Turkish column of armored vehicles near the front line in southern Idlib during the advance I was mentioning. The Syrian army is moving forward in the south towards the M4 highway. They took over 20 villages just on Friday, I believe. In total over the week, they've taken, I think, over 40 villages they've liberated in the southern section of Idlib. Basically, they've now liberated all of southern Idlib. The Russian MOD Ministry of Defense confirmed that the Turkish soldiers were embedded with the terrorists, that no Turkish observation posts had been targeted, and no Turkish soldiers located at observation posts had been harmed. The Turkish soldiers that were killed, these 33 soldiers, were supposedly members of special forces, so obviously Turkey not so happy about that. Maybe they shouldn't be so proactively supporting the terrorists. The reason the Russian statement is important is because there's the Turkish-Russian agreements that Erdogan keeps whining about Syria violating. Oh, you're violating the ceasefire agreements. However, Turkish forces, according to that same agreement, are not allowed to operate outside the observation posts, which they were doing. And the terrorists are to be disarmed of the very heavy equipment that Turkey just so happens to be directly providing them. In the thousands of tanks and armored vehicles. And there are now thousands of Turkish soldiers there. Erdogan has threatened to launch a war, to wage a full-out war against Syria if Syria does not remove its troops from all the liberated portions of Idlib by the end of the month, which is very, very quickly approaching. However, it would appear Erdogan didn't wait for the end of the month for his threat to take force. Already, Turkey is pretty much waging a war against the Syrian army. And it's kind of insane for him to demand that Syria remove its troops from its own territory. I mean, Turkey's the invader here, along with the terrorists, of course, but it's just a little bit nonsensical how Western media presents this and how Turkey presents this. The latest Turkish casualties bring the Turkish death count to over 50. It's up to 53 now. Yesterday, another Turkish soldier was killed. So, Erdogan continues to sacrifice his countrymen to protect al-Qaeda terrorists in Idlib. Pretty ridiculous, but that's exactly what he's doing. Apart from artillery support, Turkish forces continue to launch attack drones against the Syrian army, have repeatedly attempted to use U.S.-made manpads to shoot down Russian and Syrian jets flying over Idlib, carrying out airstrikes on terrorist positions. On Thursday, Syrian air defenses shot down a Turkish drone attempting to attack government positions in the Marzaf area of Idlib. Speaking in a daily briefing on Thursday evening, the head of the Russian Center for Syrian Reconciliation noted that Ankara continues to violate the agreements reached by Moscow on the Idlib de-escalation zone, Sputnik reported, as I just described above. In violation of the Sochi Accords, the Turkish side continues to support the actions of illegal armed groups in the Idlib de-escalation zone by artillery fire and the use of reconnaissance and strike drones in attacks on units of the Syrian armed forces, he highlighted. So true. On Wednesday, the jihadist fighters repeatedly used Turkish-supplied manpads in attempts to shoot down Syrian fighter jets carrying out air raids on the terrorists, but all missiles failed to reach their targets. They have kind of a short range. Those manpads are just the shoulder man-portable air defense systems. That's what manpad stands for. So they're the shoulder-launched missiles, and they don't have too far of a reach. However, in the past weeks, earlier this month, they did manage to shoot down 2 Syrian helicopters. So far, they've failed to take down any fighter jets yet, but they continue to try. They've been trying all week, and last week as well. The Russian side has warned that these attacks have become quite frequent. They target both Syrian and Russian jets, and both Syrian and Russian warplanes have had to engage in maneuvers, sometimes having to launch flares to avoid being hit, to throw the missiles off. These U.S.-made shoulder-fire missile launchers are not only being provided to the terrorists by Turkey, they're also being used directly by Turkish forces as well. Last week, 2 such missiles were launched in an attempt to down a Russian Ru-24. The attack was reportedly confirmed to have not only been carried out by a U.S.-made Stinger manpad, but from a Turkish observation post. Meaning not only did the Turkish soldiers fire them, they were on a Turkish observation post when they did it. That's crazy. So here's a tweet showing from a YouTube video. The link to the tweet's there. You can go watch the video if you like. But it basically shows that the sites on there show that it's a U.S.-made one. And not surprising, it was already verified that the manpads used to down the helicopters earlier this month were the U.S.-made ones. So that's typically what Turkey's got. It's what they've been supplying terrorists, and it's what they're also using when they try to take down Syrian and Russian warplanes. This tweet here, it says, confirming that the building the manpad launched from is a Turkish post. In the corner down there on the right, you can note a Turkish BMC Kirpi guarding the entrance to the building with its remote weapons system station active. Also, you can note HESCO barriers usually installed around Turkish posts. So they had other tweets as well with other evidence there showing that it was a Turkish observation post. But not really surprising, considering they're not only just on the post, they're willing to send the Turkish soldiers right to the front line with the terrorists. So it's really not all that surprising that they're launching missiles at Russian warplanes or Syrian warplanes. On Thursday, Idlib militants, backed by Turkish artillery fire, launched a massive counteroffensive aimed at cutting off the M5 highway, which was just recently reopened, and managed to enter the strategic city of Syria after SAA defenses broke down on Thursday. The Syrian soldiers retreated from their positions to avoid greater casualties before regrouping and mounting a counteroffensive to retake the city later on Thursday. Heavy clashes were ongoing. They had not, on Friday, successfully retaken the city, so this is a major loss. But like I said, it was a trade-off. They managed to take a large swath of land in the south that previously had been very difficult to take. It was in open plains, the Al-Ghab plain. So the terrorists and the Turkish army had sent all their equipment and most of their men over to Syria. So the Syrian army basically took full advantage of this and took a very difficult area to capture, and they took it while they were focusing all their attacks on Syria. This, of course, left Syria defenses weak because the Syrian army took most of their forces away. However, as of yesterday, Friday, they were, the elite units of the Syrian army were on their way back towards Syria to prepare for a large offensive to retake the city. As the terrorists celebrated their temporary victory in Syria, I wrote, the SA advance in southern Idlib continues to move quickly, liberating 20 villages from HTS on Thursday. Blah, blah, blah. I already just explained all that to you. So, strategic trade-off, I think, is what it was. Although the terrorists, of course, are like, oh, they're losing. Look what we did. Blah, blah. And they're going to get crushed. Russian warplanes are hammering Syria right now. So the terrorists are taking lots of losses from the attack there. And anyway, also on Friday, Erdogan called an emergency NATO meeting. He's really desperate now. Called for help with the Idlib situation, but he was denied any military aid in the province. Instead, only being given diplomatic support for what I described as his valiant efforts aimed at defending the largest al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11 from liberation by the Russian-backed Syrian offensive to retake its own territory. The Allies offered their deepest condolences to Turkey and expressed solidarity, but stopped short from taking any more practical measures after the Friday emergency meeting, RT reported. Does not mean the U.S. did not try. The U.S. pushed and pushed and pushed. Please help them, help them, the U.S. cried, but to no avail for whatever reason. So I guess that's good that NATO denied requests, because Turkey's not under attack. Turkey's own sovereignty is not under attack. Turkey's the aggressor. There's no reason for NATO to come defend them. They don't need defending. It's Syria that needs defending. Anyway, meanwhile, the Syrian advance in southern Idlib continued, as I explained. They did clear the entire Al-Ghab plain on Friday, reaching the border between Idlib and Hama provinces. So, like I said, they pretty much liberated the entire southern portion of Idlib, all the way up to the border of Hama. So they're coming very, very close now to the M4 highway on the southern front. They have only one more major village that's a stronghold, terrorist stronghold. Once they clear that, they're wide open to the M4 highway. So, interesting developments. The Turkish armed forces also directly engaged the Syrian army with heavy rocket attacks on Friday. The Turkish army has been releasing footage of attacks. Some of the footage, it's been shown that it's been recycled from older fighting. So, Turkish propaganda trying to make it seem like it's worse than it is. But they have been carrying out some quite damaging attacks against the Syrian army. They might be exaggerating them, but there are some. So not good for the Syrian army that the Turkish military is, pretty much in full-out war mode now. They were not happy about those 34 or 36 or whatever number of soldiers it was ended up being killed over the past 2 days. So they really stepped up their attacks on the Syrian army in revenge, retaliation for that. I'm sure that's why they did that. One of the reasons. On Friday afternoon, the Russian Air Force hammered Sarakib. The clashes continue. I'm just skimming through here. I've pretty much gone over all this already. The direct engagement by Turkish forces in Idlib risks escalating into a full-blown world war. Erdogan has asked the U.S. Air Force to patrol Idlib airspace. No joke. And he is pushing for the implementation of a no-fly zone. However, that could only be enforced, I think, with a combination of Turkish and U.S. firepower. How are you going to stop Russian jets from carrying out airstrikes in Idlib? Obviously, only a superpower like the U.S. having its own jets might deter Russia from doing that. However, the fact that Russian airstrikes have I think Russian airstrikes have killed some Turkish soldiers. So there's already a world war going on. The U.S., Turkey, Israel, and their proxy terrorists are on one side. Syria, Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia are on the other. Syria has become the front line in the war between the Western Empire and the axis of resistance confronting it, with Russia backing at least Syria's fight against the proxy terrorists. Now, Russia's not really part of this axis of resistance per se. They don't go all out against Israel. There's a lot of things that Russia doesn't do that they could do to help Syria. However, they do fully support Syria's war on the Western proxy terrorists. So, and the U.S. is pretty much Russia's kind of their number one enemy right now in the propaganda war. So Russia has reasons to oppose the U.S. in Syria as well. Of course, there is the Syrian occupation there going on. It's not just the terrorists in Idlib. Turkey, in Afrin, next to Idlib, Turkey also has a portion of Syria, of northern Syria, that it's occupying. U.S. has its Al-Tanf base where it's protecting an ISIS, pretty much an ISIS training camp. The U.S. base in Al-Tanf, no one can come within a certain miles of it. If they do, they get bombed. So the militants, and including ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters there in the Rockbourne refugee camp is the ISIS camp. But there's other fighters. That's where the U.S. was arming militants. I'm sure they probably still are. So there's that. Israel uses the Al-Tanf area airspace to carry out strikes in that area of Syria. And then, of course, they use the occupied Golan Heights and illegally use the Lebanese airspace to carry out strikes closer to Damascus. And of course, you've got Israel occupying the Golan Heights illegally. So, Syria's occupied and being attacked from all fronts, all sides, by Turkey, by the U.S., by the proxy terrorists, and by Israel. And yet, after 8 years of bitter war, they are coming out ahead. Granted, they did take a little loss here, but losing Sarakib temporarily, they're going to take it back, no doubt whatsoever. As soon as the elite forces come back from the south, which they're already arriving, they're going to take it back within the next few days. And they're going to continue the offensive, and we'll have to see what Turkey does. Are they going to continue stepping up their attacks? Are they going to continue escalating this war against Syria that they're really already waging? Is it going to turn into a world war? And one of these Turkish strikes, I have to go to another article here because this article didn't actually come out yesterday while I was writing my post, so this is new, but I wanted to put it in here from Southfront. I've seen it on Lebanese media, but Southfront has pictures and whatnot. So one of those airstrikes carried out by Turkey killed apparently 9 Hezbollah fighters. It was at a meeting between some Hezbollah fighters and Syrian army officers. Apparently several Syrian army officers were also killed in the airstrikes. So the Lebanese sources identified 4 of the slain fighters. I'm not going to read their names off. I'm probably going to butcher them anyway, but there's their pictures. There's 4 of them, I guess. The 2 on the left, are they the same guy? Almost look like it, or are there just 5 and only 4 have been identified? I'm not sure. In any event, Turkish airstrikes killed those Hezbollah fighters. Hezbollah is, of course, the Lebanese military group. And then apparently there was no mention of this on the Lebanese media, but among those killed there was also an Iranian commander, reportedly from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was embedded within the ranks of Hezbollah. The commander was known as Ali al-Zinjani, and there his picture is. So this is like what I was saying. There's only Iranian commanders and officers, advisors, not actually soldiers. So the Iranians that are in Syria are acting in positions of command. And apparently this is one of them. And apparently Turkish airstrikes got one, as well as these Hezbollah fighters, as well as several Syrian army officers, which is unfortunate because all of them are the ones fighting the radical ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists in Idlib. The article goes on to say that Turkish drones carried out dozens of airstrikes on Syrian forces in Idlib's southern countryside in western Aleppo on February 29th. Apparently, this is the first time I'm reading this. I'm not surprised. The intense airstrikes reportedly lost more than 40 service members, including at least 5 officers. Several of those officers may have been in this strike here. So what the Lebanese media was saying is that several Syrian army officers were killed in the attack on this meeting. They were having a meeting in one of the recently liberated areas. And the article ends by saying the devastating Turkish strikes will likely lead to more escalation in northwest Syria. No doubt. Hezbollah is known for responding to any attack on its troops in Syria. So, that's what's been going on in Syria. Things are probably going to escalate from here. Turkey will probably continue to lose more soldiers in its fight to desperately protect Al-Qaeda on behalf of the U.S. and Israel, and its own interests, of course. But that's what's going on. And this has been Jason. Till next time, have a good one. Keep your eyes open. Please do share if you like the information. Subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. Have a good one, guys. Peace.